And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be ever more acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Jesus, can you take the time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth. So sang the Irish rock band U2 in a heavily ironic lament titled Peace on Earth on their 2000 album, All That You Can't Leave Behind. Heaven on earth, the song begins. We need it now. I'm sick of all this hanging around. I'm sick of sorrow. I'm sick of pain. I'm sick of hearing again and again that there's gonna be peace on earth. U2's Irish homeland had been plagued with conflict, the Troubles they were called, for decades, and any tolerance for it had come to an end. In 1998, a peace agreement known as the Good Friday Agreement was signed and ratified by referendum. 4 months later, on August 15, 1998, 29 people were killed and over 200 more were injured by a car bomb in Northern Ireland. It was a last-ditch effort to once again destabilize the region. It has been described as the single worst incident in Northern Ireland during the conflict. But contrary to the goals of the attackers, it may well have been the final straw for a populace sick and tired of violent conflict. U2 voiced the pain, the devastation of the nation with their plea, Jesus, can you take some time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth. The peace agreement stuck. And now, years later, the conflict in Northern Ireland is mostly a sad memory. Around the time U2 was writing that song, I met an Indian man who left a lasting impression on me with his work of peacemaking. He had started a center for peace in an area of India that had a roughly equal mix of Christians, Muslims, and Hindus, and it had sustained much conflict as a result. The detail I remember most was his passionate contention that a moment comes, he described, a moment comes when the human soul cries out for peace. That is when peace building can truly begin. His hard-won wisdom has stayed with me, particularly in times when I feel despair about entrenched conflict and senseless violence. I remember his contention that hope for lasting peace is found in a moment, the moment when the human soul cries out for peace, when anything else is no longer an option. It is when we cry, Jesus, can you take the time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth. The soul of a formerly Orthodox Jewish man cried out for peace during his conscripted service in the Israeli army. As a religious person at the time, he was assigned to a non-combat unit. His job was recovering bodies following bombings of all kinds and returning them to the deceased's family. He learned in the process, as he described it to us, that for a parent of a broken child, the cause of the death does not matter. In the end, it didn't matter, he said, if it was a terrorist bus bombing or a military missile strike. The grief of the parent over the death of a child is the same. Mothers cry, fathers weep. All are united in their basic humanity and in their desperate need for violence to end. It was seeing this common humanity of Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Muslims and Christians alike that caused this young soldier to see the critical need for peace on earth. He created a peace-building organization called Kids for Peace that brings together children from religious families, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, at a summer camp to get to know each other. His hope was that the children would experience the common humanity they share with those who differ from them, with those who were supposed to be their enemies just because of an accident of birth, and that experience would change their attitudes and their behaviors as they grew into adulthood. His hope was that the next generation would not feel the need to cry out, "Jesus, can you take the time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth." In the last talk of the recent Evolving Faith Conference, organizer Sarah Bessey acknowledged the difficult circumstances that many attendees faced with a kind of litany. At one point, she choked up as she named all of us who have lost someone we loved and have found that there is not always room for our grief and our sorrow and our rage for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Uvalde and the Highway of Tears, and the fact that I'm so furious that I could spend my entire time just listing names and places. Her grief and that of the community to which she was speaking, mostly people struggling to find a way to be Christian. Their grief is not limited to their personal loss. It includes those killed by systemic evils like racism, white Christian nationalism, homo and transphobia, and all gender-based violence. Even without the literal words, you could hear her cry, "Jesus, can you take the time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth." The people who lament for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Uvalde and the Highway of Tears know that peace comes at a cost. There is no peace without justice. "Give the king your justice, O God," our psalmist pleads today, "and your righteousness to the king's son, that he may rule your people righteously and the poor with justice." When our human souls cry out for peace, we need to work for justice. This is how the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the children in Uvalde and off of the Highway of Tears, is how they birthed movements like Black Lives Matter, Every Child Matters, and the inquiries into missing and murdered Aboriginal women. Our desire for peace calls us through people like John the Baptist to repent, to change our ways, and as our psalmist writes today, to defend the needy among the people. For when that happens, when righteousness flourishes, there shall be an abundance of peace. For the people of Ukraine and Russia, for people in China, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, for addicted and homeless people at the corner of Quadra and Pandora, for people whose basic human identities make them especially vulnerable to violence, for all who need justice, we will continue to sing, "Jesus, can you take the time to throw a drowning man a line? Peace on earth." For our souls cry out for peace.